Welcome to the March 15th regular business board meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. This meeting is being made public via Zoom and video recorded with sound for purposes of public broadcast. It is also being live streamed via our website. All participants are muted upon entry. There will be an opportunity for public comment after tonight's presentations. The chat feature will be turned on at that time, and comments and questions will be read by the district solicitors. We'll start this evening with presentations from Mr. Copeland and also Dr. Gaudioso and Dr. McGloin. So Mr. Copeland.
Good evening, everyone, members of the board and members of the public. Just a brief update on our reopening. We remain on schedule for the week of March 22nd. This past week, all of our principals completed their individual school presentations to their school communities about the specific nature of what's going to happen in the schools. And I understand that those were well attended and well received. We also have our pathway requests. We do have to do some data cleanup on those, but we expect to have that completed within the next several days and by the end of the week. Transportation is in the process of rerouting the routes so that the times may change because the times of school, particularly for the elementary, have changed, as well as knowing who's coming in and trying to adjust what the pickup times would be. And finally, if you go by the schools, you'll see the tents are going up, and that's happened at both middle schools. They're scheduled to go up at the high schools tomorrow, and the rest of the schools. Tables and other specific setups for the schools. So, in essence, we're getting ready to open. We're anxiously awaiting for our students to those who want to or can return in just another week. So we're looking forward to that. If there are any questions or comments from the board before I introduce our speakers?
I wanted to take a quick moment and thank all of the principals and other staff and administration at each of the buildings. The feedback that I heard as well was really positive. I know that the meetings I attended were quite well done, and so I just wanted to thank all of the principals for providing such a good and thorough explanation of what's going on in each building, because our buildings are so individual and so different that I think that really provided a great look into what it will look like at each of our schools. Does anyone else on the board have comments specific to that? Great. Why don't we move on to our next presentation?
Okay. As everyone knows, we are building a third middle school. It will be grades 5 through 8. And one of the things that we wanted to do was not just build a school and move the grades, move 5th grade into the middle school and carry on as the way we were, but we wanted to take the opportunity to say, you know what, this is a great chance to say, how shall we envision not only the grade reorganization, but how we deliver middle school education with the 5th and 6th grade in the same building, the 7th and 8th grade. And at the same time, what opportunities might that provide for those schools that are in K through 4, and to do both of those in conjunction with the strategic plans the district values. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Drs. McGloin and Gaudioso to update the board on this. This was a presentation that was given to the curriculum committee of the board. Normally, we would have redone it last Monday, but because of the reopening, we thought it would make more sense to do it this evening. So with that, Dr. McGloin, I think you're first up.
Yep, thank you. So as Mr. Copeland had mentioned, we have reconvened or convened the K4 and the 5-8 committees to start to plan for the upcoming shift in our grade configuration. And so our meetings began in the fall, a little different timing for both the 5-8 and the K4. And Dr. Gaudioso is going to go into where she began with K4 first, and then I'll pick up with 5-8. So I'm going to turn it over to her to talk about our commitment to the strategic plan as we continue our work. Next slide.
So one of the most exciting things about the work of these two committees is that, as Mr. Copeland said, this is about so much more than just building a school. This is really about vision and alignment with the strategic plan. So the 5 pathways here represent the 5 pathways of the strategic plan: the transformative curriculum, professional learning, student-driven schools, spirit of community, and redefining success. And under each of these pathways, you can see certain traits that the district is advancing towards. For example, looking at ways that we can increase student personal exploration, support a growth mindset, give students opportunity for voice, where we can look at our curriculum and find ways to connect it, build in inquiry so that these are inquiry-driven learning experiences, and we're breaking down the walls of school and students are engaging in learning beyond school, as well as across the community when you think of, for example, the residencies, which we look forward to getting back to. So all of these traits anchor us as a district so that when we're doing anything, we're doing it in light of the strategic plan. These two committees, everything that they're working toward is aligned with this and in concert with this. So it's been really exciting to see the possibility here. Next slide, please.
So as I had mentioned, we began our work again in October of the current school year. And with that, we really needed to think about what the milestones are for completion. And there was a document that was shown last year. We updated that document to be current for our path right now. And as you can tell, some of the tasks are already complete. Right now, we're steeped in the 5-8 and the K-4 curriculum design work with a plan of having something to propose for a whole design by the end of September. We'll have an update for the board again, at least at the 5-8 level for at the end of the school year, and then continue on with our work in the summertime. In the summer as well, the beginning of the summer, we're looking to confirm the transition plan for our 5-8 students. So make a decision on how they're going to enter the new middle school and all of the middle schools. And then you can see we're moving down to hiring principals, looking at staffing for the buildings, designing our extracurricular programs. And it's a really robust milestone timeline that we have, but we're all on the right path to make that happen. Next slide.
So the K-4 team was scheduled to start work last spring, and unfortunately with the pandemic, that work was put on hold. So the team reconvened at the beginning of, at the end of November this fall. And the goal is to make recommendations along that timeline that Dr. McGloin just shared, so that by the end of the school year, we'll have draft program recommendations that both position us to advance the strategic plan, as you saw, but also align with the work of the 5-8 committee and continue to prepare students for this changing future. Now, the 2 essential questions we're working from are: how can we reimagine our K-4 program? And what could the K-4 experience be for our students? Next slide. So one of the most important elements and also most challenging elements in the K-4 work is this is also an opportunity for reducing the crowding in the elementary schools as we change this configuration. So really making sure that the group sees all of the possibility and potential. This is more than just a reconfiguration. This is more than just impact of a building project. This really is just an incredible opportunity, and creating some urgency for that so that we capitalize on this timeline to really be positioned for both strategically advancing the strategic plan and being in line with the vision that's created out of the 5-8 group. So to begin the work, we engaged in some reimagination and worked to create a shared vision for the future of K-4 learning. Now, what this meant was really digging in and considering what is unique to the K-4 learning experience that makes it distinct from 6-8 and secondary school, or even 5-8 and secondary school. Additionally, 2 other really important opportunities that are running through the work have to do with our evidence-based practices to support literacy and also equity opportunities. One of the things that's really critical in this work is to align it with the district vision for equity. And we're using this reimagination work to also look at how do we improve and increase evidence-based practices that have all students reading by third grade, for example, have all students really becoming advanced and highly proficient in math. And how do we do this in a way that is making sure that any barriers to equity or to access are identified and limited, and really how do we do this in a way that really advances the district commitment to equity. Next slide, please. So we have about 36 members on the K4 committee, and there's balance across schools and areas of expertise. We have teachers, supervisors, specialists, administrators, principals, and representation across content, student services, special education, and special area. We have invited about 11 K4 parents, and a few attended our last meeting, and they'll continue to work with us and join us this month. So this is exciting. The parents who are coming on board are coming from broad backgrounds, and I have a lot to offer just with the parent perspective, but also some really rich professional backgrounds that I think are really going to help just build the perspective of the group as we look at especially STEM careers, fields, real world problem solving, and really just having outside of education lenses. So that'll be exciting. Next slide, please. So we took some really thoughtful and careful, focused first steps. And it was important to develop a vision of possibility and potential for that K4 program, and really looking at what do we see as what we want for future K4 students. And this was to lead to a vision and mission statement that's unique to Lower Merion K4 education. And the idea here is that this will guide the work of the committee as a whole, would help drive the identification of subcommittees, and this vision and mission that's created unique to K4 would align with the district strategic plan, the district mission and vision, and align with the 5-8 committee. Next slide, please. So what was really exciting to start the work was really developing a composite portrait of a future graduate in grade 4. So by the time a student leaves grade 4, the team really unpacked the ideas of what the students' experiences had been like. So this was sort of a future thinking exercise that helped us envision what experiences in school and out would students have had, what will they have learned in school and out? What expectations would they have for themselves and for their learning? And what goals, ambitions, and dreams do students cherish? And this exercise really helped the team to develop a picture of the traits that we want to support in developing in K4 students. Next slide, please. So from that, we ended up with a bank of sort of commitments that we started to work from to develop the mission and vision statement. As you can see here, a lot of this has to do with social emotional skills. A lot of this has to do with culture and building relationships. And one of the really powerful strands that ran through this was having students really see themselves as part of a community, and really having positive dispositions toward future learning and toward others. So this was something that helped us really make sure we're looking at the whole student. When we looked at all that we wanted for students, that led us to ask, well, if this is the student who we want to see leaving us in 4th grade with all of these wonderful traits and experiences, then the next question we asked in our backwards design here was, well, then what program would be developed to support this? And that is the thinking that's helping us develop the subgroups. So next slide, please. So that backwards thinking or backwards planning from this composite future 4th grade student helped us develop a draft statement for our vision and a draft mission statement. What's really powerful about both of these is just how much of it has to do with the uniqueness of K4, helping students engage in these cohesive learning communities, creative collaborations, innovative real world critical thinking, supporting students in persevering to reach their full potential as both independent and social learners who value themselves and the diversity of others. And then the mission of K4 education will be to design the most impactful and authentic learning experiences to advance student growth, ownership, wonder, and to cultivate these positive dispositions that enrich personal, social, academic, global connections and build belonging. And the idea of positive dispositions we see reflected in the habits of mind that is already part of the K4 experience. Next slide, please. So from this initial work emerged 5 subcommittees. One is focused on a reimagined design or schedule for learning, and this will be the approach and the design for a student day. Um, this group is working in phases. They're working first with what are varied approaches to designing K4 or elementary programs. And the later recommendations may have to do with schedule. The committee was committed to first, we have to decide what is the experience that we want for students. What is the design, whether interdisciplinary, et cetera, before we determine the how, which would be the schedule. The second subgroup is transformative curriculum and instruction. And this group originally started as 2. One was essentializing curriculum and the other was transformative instruction. So there were 2 themes that emerged. Had we started this work last year, we would have been doing a lot of consideration of how do we essentialize the curriculum, scaled down to the critical so that we can make more space for problem-based learning and things that are really innovative in letting students apply learning in interdisciplinary ways. However, what we just learned through the unfortunate closure of the past year and our forays into remote learning, we had to essentialize the curriculum to do those well. So the teachers coming to this group, asked that really powerful question, can we do more of that? Can we consider that essentialization that we've begun and look at doing that in even more thoughtful ways so that we can make space for these interdisciplinary problem-based learning experiences, performance tasks that really are going to transform our practice. The third subcommittee is social emotional learning, growth and development. Within this group, we're looking, of course, at social emotional learning, but also cultural proficiency and executive function and habits of mind are areas that emerged as uh, areas that we wanted to make sure that students had guaranteed experiences in. Executive function is something that helps students develop independent learning skills and really have agency and ownership of their learning, and they're able to hold themselves accountable and set goals and work toward uh, completion and success in school experiences. However, it's not necessarily something that works across a continuum or a curriculum. Teachers teach these skills, but what we wanted to do was develop what we would call a guaranteed experience so that we are helping students develop these independent learning skills over the years. So that's going to be part of that committee work as well. Additionally, that cultural proficiency work, how do we take what we've learned and accomplished this year in cultural proficiency and keep growing. The fourth committee, intervention, access, and equity. This speaks to that idea of achieving our equity goals, but really looking at it in certain ways that we're improving and increasing our research-based practices to support students who need some extra, who need some intervention, and that we're being really thoughtful in how we do it. And I'll give an example here of one of the conversations. When we look at win time, for example, one of the one of the conversations here about, how we design our intervention time, we're being really thoughtful about how do we make sure that when we're offering, reading support or math support or intervention during a particular intervention or extension block, we're not doing it at the expense of a child's access to a STEM experience, for example. So if some students are getting their STEM experience while others are getting an intervention, we may be creating a barrier to access some really engaging, rich experiences. So the group is really committed to defining and describing what is best practice there so that we can make recommendations at the end of the year. And finally, the school culture group is going to be starting once all of our parents are on board. This group is focused on developing the school community within each school, but also looking at how do we extend beyond the walls of the schools and capitalize on partnerships with local institutions, but also with all the skills and talents of our parent community, and really develop a rich culture in support of the schools. So those are our 5 subcommittees. We similarly hope to have draft recommendations or update by the end of the school year. And then our committees would also do some summer work and have final recommendations at the end of September 2021. Next slide.
So the 5-8 committee actually began meeting last school year in October, and they met until March when the pandemic hit. And we were able to regroup and we organized the committee. We took a look at the structure of the former committee and we revamped it a little bit for our work because we have a shorter time frame to accomplish it. And so the 5-8 committee rebooted in October. Next slide. As Dr. Gaudioso said, with the essential questions for K4, you'll see that they're really pretty much the same questions that we use in 5-8, which is how can we reimagine our 5-8 program and what could the 5-8 experience be for our students? And really, these are driving questions in the work that we do every other week when we meet to provide us some real thought process behind what we're doing. Next slide. So as I had mentioned, we rebooted the committee in October and restructured it. There are now 49 members on the committee. All were invited. Many of the members of the original committee still stay on the committee. We did invite some additional members so that we had a balance between the schools and the areas of expertise. We have teachers, specialists, administrators, and parents. Our parents joined us in late December and have been attending. They make every single meeting, which is amazing. We meet every other Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't think any of them have missed a meeting, which is just amazing. We have administrators at all levels. We have teachers at all levels. Special education and curriculum are included in the group as well, because we felt like it was really essential to have a cross section of people that we're representing during the 5-8 structure. And so we made sure that we had that real breadth of membership. Next slide. So when the reboot happened, we dismantled the committees, the subcommittees that existed prior to October, because we really felt like we needed to take a step back and work on the mission and vision before we could proceed. And there was a mission and vision committee that was meeting last year. And so they continued their work and they really gave us our beginnings of what our mission and vision were for our committee. We felt like this was a really important step because it really needed to be our North Star. It's where we look at when we're making all of our decisions. I actually just met with all the leaderships committee for all the subcommittees this week, and they wanted to make sure that our vision's on every single document as we're moving forward and it's being cited, because if we're not moving towards the mission and vision, then we should be looking in a different direction. And that is really the belief of the whole entire committee. So our mission, next slide, that the committee worked on and put together, you could see on the screen, and it's about building relationships, cultivating curiosity, and developing intellectual independence. Knowing that middle school is not just a stepping stone to high school, but it's about empowering students to positively impact their community, affirm continued growth of adolescent identity, because we know that middle level is such an important part of our students as they grow. The vision is on the next slide. And this vision is actually pretty long, but it's really how do we get to where we want to go? And this vision helped us to decide what our subcommittees were. We took every one of the lines on this vision, and each line the committee looked at and said, okay, if we're talking about the students are a reason for being, or they're empowered when their hearts, minds, and spirits are engaged. What does that look like? And what possible subcommittees could we create to make sure that we're achieving this vision? So each one of these lines was really thoughtfully evaluated. And that's how we came to the subcommittees that we are currently working on. And you can see it's about diversity, embracing responsibility to honor and support our students who are emotionally, socially, and intellectually to support them. It's a collective responsibility through collaboration, reflective teaching. Students continue to develop their sense of self, respect for others, and understanding how their gifts and talents can positively impact the world. So that whole entire thought process then led us to our subcommittees, and we have 6 of them. Next slide. Our first subcommittee is school culture, and school culture is about clubs, events, extracurricular activities. One of the things that our 5-8 committee felt so strongly about is that every single student participates in some type of club or extracurricular activity, so they feel that sense of belonging to the school. And so they're really focused on that as a group every time they meet. Under each of these subcommittees, you're going to see the same exact sentence, which is, what diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations should our subcommittee remain cognizant of as we move forward? This is a question that we ask our subcommittees to think about, and the work that they're doing every single week that they meet. And so it's under every one of these committees. Our second committee is student intervention, enrichment, and well-being. It's similar to what the K4 is looking at. We included well-being in this group because we felt like it didn't necessarily need to be a different block of time. Depending on the level that we're in right now, we could have something like a win period. We have learn, we have advisory, we have homework, homeroom. So there's a lot of conversation about, do they all need to work differently, or should we have one block, like a lunch and learn type of a block in the school day? And so that's a big part of the conversation. And then how do we make sure that we have that intervention, enrichment, and well-being as a part of that whole subcommittee, or that period, a block of time? Next slide. Teaming is the next subcommittee that we have, and they're having a lot of conversation in that group about what does the model look like. And when it says scheduling model, it's not about the set schedule per se, but it's more about, should we do a loop of 5-6? Should their schedules look different than the 7-8 schedules look? Should we look at those teams as smaller teams, like maybe a team of 2 to 3 teachers in a 5th or 6th grade level, and maybe a team of 5 or 6 teachers when we get into the 7th and 8th grade? So that whole scheduling model, looping and houses and pods are all part of that. And there also is a really rich conversation going on right now about interdisciplinary teaching. We have classes, but we really believe that all students should have an interdisciplinary experience. So what might that look like as well? Unified Arts is the next committee, and that's an interesting committee because we have a lot of unified arts teachers on that committee, and they're really focused on what is their mission and vision as a group. What kind of things do we think we should add, maybe delete or modify? Should we look at exploratory models, or should we specialize as the students get older? And so that's the work that's happening in that committee. The next slide. Our DEI committee is a dual function committee. Every member that is a part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee actually is on another committee as well. They meet the opposite week of our standing meeting. So when we meet every other Friday, the DEI committee meets the opposing Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So they actually meet weekly, all of the people that are on this committee, because they're focused on what's happening in each of the subcommittees, and then pulling that all together to make sure that it really is the depth and breadth that we're looking for. And then they're also looking at, are there other things we should be thinking about that we're missing in these other subcommittees? Our final committee is grading and reporting, and that's not specifically about report cards, but it's about what kinds of things should we be looking at for reporting for students. How do we showcase individual student learning, portfolios and narratives? And so there's a lot of conversation about what is really important for us to report to parents and for us to be thinking about as we're grading and reporting students. So a lot of these subcommittees actually, they really overlap, and we see that maybe like the grading and reporting committee might be talking about something that's happening on teaming. And so there's a lot of conversation about the overlap to make sure that we have a cohesive program moving forward. We recognize that these are the beginning committees. Obviously, we're going to need a committee to schedule. We're going to need a committee to look at core content areas. We're going to have conversations with K4 about what music is going to look like, what does our world language look like, so that we have a K8 cohesive program, but this is our start. Next slide. So as I had mentioned, our subcommittees meet regularly. They actually get homework assignments on a regular basis as well. It's really fun to listen to teachers giving each other homework versus the students' homework. But I see that happen every single time they meet. Each of the subcommittees is chaired by a teacher, not an administrator in the district, and we're really pleased with that. They're doing such a wonderful job, and we appreciate all the time and effort that these teachers are putting into it. We wanted to give you a brief update on each of them, but as I had said, grading and reporting is looking at what types of things do we want to report on that's not just per se grades, and how do we showcase student individual work. And so they've been pulling different models that exist outside of our school district across the United States and even internationally. Christina Paul has been really instrumental in getting us EAB support on this. School culture has also taken a look at the research on school culture. They had a whole presentation on the student success survey the last time they met, so they could think about the results of that and how that can impact moving forward. Next slide. Enrichment, intervention, and well-being. They have asked for resources. They are visiting schools. Actually, they've been to 2 schools virtually already, and they have 3 more lined up to see what's happening in other districts that are outside of our state, but in the United States. Teaming sent a survey out to all of the teachers in the district. They had 56 responses that was shared with all the other committee leads, because there was some really great information that our teachers shared with us about what they've seen with teaming, what that might look like, and how it could impact the school. Unified Arts also surveyed all of the Unified Arts teachers in the district, and they started to think about what are the non-negotiables and what is their mission moving forward. So there's a lot of really great work that is happening right now, and commitment from our committee members. They are all in, and it is truly appreciated. Questions?
Before there's questions from the board, let me just add some things. One, what you saw tonight are some real hardcore deliverables from both committees. What you didn't see is them working. So you see the end result, and that's great. But if you could, like any committee, see the hard work and the discussion that goes into it, that's really important for the people and for the result. I'd also like to just, again, for those who have been watching the school district over the last several years, you should have seen the relationship between what they're doing and the district strategic plan. That's a lot of the same themes and issues are part of that. At some point, you as a board may be getting some proposals for national consultants in the areas of elementary education and middle school education, because they want to use that as a touchstone also, and to structure the work. And finally, before this year, every administrator in the district had as an evaluative requirement that they had to visit at least one school district inside the state of Pennsylvania and one school district outside of the state of Pennsylvania. We're finding that those visitations, as Alexis talked about, give tremendous return for what people are learning from surrounding areas. So with that, I see little hands there.
Great, thank you. Ms. Kalish?
Thank you. So I want to start out by saying thank you. That sounds really fantastic. And I can tell a great deal of really hard work and a lot of smart people put a lot of thoughtful time into that. I also want to preface my question by saying that I understand our COVID response has been the priority for the last year. But I had a question for you, Dr. Gaudioso, regarding specifically K-4 scheduling and curricular design, and whether or not any of that has included the discussion of the merits of half versus full day kindergarten, and whether full day kindergarten might be something the district could or should look into in the near future.
We do have a couple kindergarten teachers on the committee, and that is something that they have on their list for us to explore. We really haven't gotten very far in the exploration of it because schedule is later. But it is something that they have on the list of things to just stay open-minded about. So yeah, there's discussion, but we're early.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the continued prioritization of that particular area. Thank you.
Dr. Gilbert?
Yeah, I just like to follow up on that and ask Mr. Copeland, because my understanding is that one of the things that we've done with your leadership is to provide extended day kindergarten to those students who are most in need of it, given the space constraints that we have had. So I just want to, my first question is just to make sure that that is accurate. I imagine
Sure.
It's been different under COVID.
I mean, we did expand the extended day kindergarten, but the district has been doing extended day kindergarten before I came. And this is a program where, for those students who are identified, they were given a full day of kindergarten. But you're absolutely right, Dr. Gilbert. The one difficulty that we've had in this has been finding the space for full day kindergarten. This is my third district as superintendent, and I had developed full day kindergarten in the first two, but so far it's thwarting me in Lower Merion, mostly due to space considerations.
Thank you. I also would like to thank Dr. McGloin and Dr. Gaudioso for that presentation. And I know that much of this work is being discussed more fully and will continue to be so, to do so in the curriculum committee of the board. But it is very exciting. I've watched as the strategic plan, which is a very progressive strategic plan, has become more, actually in practice. And it was also really exciting to be able to have a school where the facilities were actually designed around the kind of teaching and learning that we want to be happening. And I know that we're also going to be looking at, once the other middle schools are reduced in size, we're going to kind of go look at those schools and see. Obviously, we can't do what we did with the new school in terms of facilities, but we're going to be looking at the ways in which we can kind of take the parts of that we can, new kinds of furniture, and maybe we would end up moving some walls. So I'm just wondering if Mr. Copeland can talk about the way in which, is this committee only focused on the new, as yet unnamed middle school, or is this to guide all of the schools?
This is absolutely to guide all of the middle schools and all of the elementary schools, not just the new middle school. And so, Alexis, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm smiling because we're also in the process of selecting furniture for the new middle school. And so we visited a showroom in Norristown, and we had Sarah Stout and Chris Hall with us. And Sarah was so excited about what wall she wanted to take down and what furniture she needed to move in, because we're very thoughtful about this being a 5-8 committee for the whole entire district. This is not about a new school. It's great that we have a new school, but the configuration is changing, and it really is about how the program is going to change across the district. And so, so our principals at the other two schools are very much so aware. of that and are advocating already for what they could have in their buildings so that they could actualize the vision that we're creating for 5-8.
Yes, that wouldn't surprise me of Mr. Hall or his staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Ackman.
Hi, that's actually a great segue into my question. But first of all, this is so exciting. I agree. Thank you, and all the amazing thought. Is the idea that, and I love that this is a catalyst for rethinking, the program across the district. Would this roll out in all the schools? I guess I'm mainly talking about middle school, or would we kind of roll things out in the new middle school first? My other question is, are we thinking about some kind of like we've done, although if that's, a little bit suspended due to COVID, right now, there's some guaranteed experiences with field trips that Amy has helped establish across the elementary schools. Are we thinking that there will be some guaranteed experiences or programs at the 3 middle schools as part of this? And I know one of the things that we like about the district is we have some things that are standard, and then each school kind of has their own little maybe subculture that's slightly different. But I just wanted to hear a little more about how you're thinking about what will be consistent across the district and what may be different as you're doing this. Thank you.
As all of the elementary schools, all of the middle schools are being thought of as a district initiative. So the basic tenets of the program in the schools will be the same. Now, the district has also, had some differences. Some schools focus on Spanish, some schools focus on French. There are different interdisciplinary programs in the different schools, and I know that those things are being discussed. But we're not going to start in September of 2022 with a middle school program and say to the other 2 middle schools, you have to wait and see how this turns out. They'll be part of it. In terms of the looking at the individual nature of the middle schools, Alexis, I know your committee has thought about that.
Yeah, and that's part of the conversation with school culture. I mean, every school definitely has their own identity, and they should have their own identity. But having a cohesive program across all 3 middle schools is really essential as well. So it is a balance of the two, where you do see the same programming. So, if we decide we want, I'm going to say win period across all the 3, the schedules will look the same. But that's not to say that there won't be some differences just because of the identity of the school. And so, that's a big conversation in school culture right now, for sure, in that committee, because we know that there'll be some differences. And as we move forward, we also need to think about, our programs, our interdisciplinary programs. That's just not on the docket for right now, but that'll come down the road. So that may be something that's different. We're just not sure at this point in time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? I wanted to take a moment and say thank you for describing the work of the committee and the participation of the parents and the teachers. I think it's really great to learn a little bit more about how the committees are working, and I love seeing the parent involvement because I think it brings such a different perspective, and so I really appreciate that. And also wanted to just comment on the DEI, the diversity and equity and inclusion piece being so integral to each of the subcommittees, I think is so important. So I wanted to just say how important I think that is, and I think that it's really great work that you're doing. Do we have any other questions? No. Oh, Ms. Kalish.
Sorry, when Mr. Copeland was talking, I had something occurred to me, and I'm just curious if it has been decided if the new middle school will be French or Spanish for the foreign language, or if it'll have both, and how that'll be handled with the elementary schools that'll feed into it.
So the middle schools now don't necessarily share the same approach to world language, but this is being discussed. Alexis?
Yeah, so we decided we would hit unified arts first, so that would be the subcommittee that we did first, and then world language will be a broader subcommittee. I meet with the chairs of the world language regularly though, and so they have a whole conceptual idea of what it might be able to look like. We have I think 4 or 5 members of our world language department. So it is pretty heavily represented, but that's going to have to be done in conjunction with the elementary. So we are having those conversations. I think we're looking for consistency, honestly, would be our goal in this in the end, but we're not, that'll be our next round of subcommittees, that subcommittee.
Okay, that sounds great. I know everybody's really passionate about their own little thing. It struck a note in my head and I figured I'd ask while I had you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much, Dr. McGlone and Dr. Gaudioso on that presentation. And I think we can then move on, unless Mr. Copeland, do you have anything else that you'd want to add?
No, only that I neglected to mention in the update that we've gotten now most of our staff, well over 1,000 vaccinated. And so as part of reopening, we'll be moving forward and we're in very good shape.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Really fantastic that, that we've been able to have so many of our staff vaccinated. So moving on to the next part of our agenda for this evening will be the committee meeting reports. I'll start by saying that the March 5th policy committee meeting was canceled. And we had sort of a joint March 3rd and March 5th curriculum committee meeting due to some technical difficulties. But I believe it's Ms. Finger will be giving that report.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. So as Ms. Klein said, we started originally on March 3rd for our scheduled meeting, and that ended at 9:19 due to some technical difficulties with within the district. So we resumed on March 5th with the second of 3 presentations, the first of which was the K4-5-8 committee presentation that you just heard from Drs. McGloin and Gaudioso. We started the March 5th meeting with a Policy 257 update by Ms. Schaefer because, as Ms. Klein again said, the policy committee meeting was canceled due to our rescheduled curriculum. So there was a just quick review of Policy 257, which is Title I Parent Member Engagement Policy, and they're not recommending any changes. Penn Wynne, Penn Valley, and Belmont Hills currently receive Title I funding. So then the second presentation was cultural proficiency, and that was by Ms. Partridge, Dr. Gaudioso, Mr. Bird, Ms. Kehoe, Mr. Bray, and Ms. Hannon. And the goals of this is student-centered, so they're moving the student experience to the forefront. They've developed some guaranteed student learning experiences that occur on the same day for all K-12 students that sends a message of importance to the students, the families, the faculty. Knowing that communication is key, the information that goes home to families is important. So letters are sent home announcing the lesson, and then post-lesson grade level specific letters are sent so parents can follow up with some questioning at home. There's shared aligned professional development for K-12 that's focused on supporting teachers in the implementation of the lesson. And these lessons, the scope of it goes beyond just Black History Month. So Mrs. Partridge spoke about the K-5 cultural proficiency CP for kids, so cultural proficiency for kids lessons that were initially developed by the Penn Wynne Elementary School cultural proficiency team. And then after the events surrounding last summer, they determined that the CP, the cultural proficiency needed to be scaled up and delivered across all of the elementary schools. So these lessons were delivered on November 13th, February 25th, and to be determined dates between March and April and May. There's scripted lessons that fall under 4 domains: identity, diversity, justice, and action. And they're all anchored around a children's picture book. There's a lesson template, so each team has a similar format that aligns to the strategic plan, habits of mind, social justice standards, and learning targets in the form of I can statements that help students understand the purpose of the lesson. And there's a lot of community support around the equity work, a Black Lives Matter march, and a fundraiser that raised over $3,000 to buy books for the school libraries were both student-led initiatives. And then the Black History Month 2021 experience for secondary schools was the next presentation. Again, the goal is to create a shared experience for the secondary students that begins in February, goes beyond a February event in the form of up to 4 guaranteed lessons and activities during Learn or Rally, depending on which middle school, and Advisory in high school. And these are aligned with the Week of Action and go deeper than the people we always learn about. So in high school, these are facilitated by faculty during Advisory. And over the 4 weeks, there's culture, Black culture. We celebrate, but do we respect? Black education and Black joy as resistance. And norms were established and lessons created that teachers could use. There's additional training and practice for the high school teachers ahead of the Black culture lesson, and a website of information was created. So it's like one-stop shopping for teachers and the community with information. It's really impressive. Then Dr. Paul gave a presentation on the parent and staff survey. She shared the results of the surveys that was sent to the staff and the district families. And the goal was to help determine the likeliness of participation in full-time return to in-person school, as well as to find out what types of information they would need to know before deciding yes or no. Went to families on the 16th and returned on the 22nd, and then staff went out on the 25th with the return of March 1st. We had 3,619 responses from families and 934 responses from staff. And the surveys were personalized to each student in a family, so exact information down to homeroom could be used to make determinations. School-based information sessions, as Mr. Copeland discussed, have been held. And for detailed information, you can check out the full presentation from the March 3 board docs. And that concluded the meeting. And the next one, I do not have the date. I believe it's April 6th, maybe, whatever the Wednesday is. Thank you.
Yes, I think it'll be actually April. Yeah, April 7th. Sorry. Thank you, Ms. LaPera. Next, Mr. Maury, if you could give the update from the March 10th ad hoc committee meeting for equity and anti-racism.
Absolutely. The ad hoc committee on equity and anti-racism was held on March 10th. And the committee had 3 primary topics for discussion: a review of the community feedback from the breakout sessions at our February ad hoc, and an update on Lmsb's equity and racism support. Actually, you just heard the presentation on the curriculum on cultural proficiencies and Black History Month was also shared at the ad hoc committee meeting, and then an update on the equity audit process. So the review of the feedback from the breakout groups from February included the review of the 4 top priority areas identified by the stakeholder groups that were the focal areas of the equity audit, which included staff diversity, curriculum, professional development, pedagogy, and instruction. And again, so these are the 4 areas that the group would consider engaging an outside consultant to review as part of the equity audit process. And again, from those breakout groups, there was general consensus that there was agreement that those were the most important areas, but also wanted to include some discussion of communication and policies. We also received an update on the support provided to the district by Dr. Dowdy, our equity consultant, in her role in the role that she plays for the district, and that support generally falls in 3 categories: administrative support, consisting of monthly support provided to each school principal and members of their administrative teams, focused on trainings on racial equity, exploring curriculum ideas, and providing staff resources such as staff surveys and resources on how staff can safely and effectively engage in conversations around race. Also, the second area was around staff support, which consists of monthly staff PRPs or professional development sessions, monthly meetings with the cultural proficiency teams, racial literacy teams, and gender alliance teams, and providing them with or walking them through the process of reviewing curriculum, support with lesson planning, identification of staff and student priority areas, and discussions of intersectionality. And the third area is support provided as needed for students, to provide support for students in student leadership groups in student leadership teams, on issues around restorative practices, the Council on Race and Equity and Inclusion, in the creation of their policies and procedures. That's one of the student committees that was recently created. And there's also on the schedule for spring 2021 student workshops at the middle and high school level on racial equity. Next week was the report on Black History Month and cultural proficiency. I won't go into that as we got a thorough report from Ms. Finger on that just a second ago. And then the last report was an update on the process where we are with the equity audit. And then looking at the proposed schedule with the announcement of the RFP that was scheduled to happen this week, the proposal deadline would be April 5th for potential consultants. The planned review of those proposals would be April 12th and 13th. Have a scheduled window for interviews, April 16th through the 21st. Deliberation on a recommendation in early May, the 3rd through the 7th. And then a recommendation would be presented to the ad hoc committee on May 7th and proposed to the board for a vote at our May 17th meeting to hire a contractor. Some of the requested deliverables include a work plan outlining methods and approaches that would be used to answer the agreed upon areas of focus and questions of interest, ongoing consistent communication with Dr. Paul, Special Assistant to the Superintendent on Research and Program Evaluation to ensure smooth implementation, a written report of the findings and recommendations, informal working meeting with a small group of representatives from committee members, and lastly, formal presentations to the ad hoc committee on equity and anti-racism and to the board of school directors. Our next ad hoc committee meeting will be April 14th via Zoom at 7:30 p.m. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mooring. And then our final committee report for this evening will be from the March 11th Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting. Mr. Driscoll, I believe you're.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Klein. Yes, we met this past Thursday, March 11th, and we began reviewing and recommending for approval list of bills. We then reviewed and recommended for approval the purchasing report, which had the following items: Clipper Pipe and Service, $190,000 to replace an old chiller at Penn Win. Weatherproofing Technologies, $1,195,000 to replace the roof at Belmont Hills. Carr and Duff, $10,800 to remove an old utility pole that was needed to support temporary classrooms at Gladwin Elementary quite some time ago. Combined contract, Corbin Inc. and Global Industries Inc. for a total of $27,682.50 to purchase some new furniture for the staff at Lower Marion High School. Applied Video Technologies, $37,264. Purchase new portable wireless conference microphone equipment to allow for more social distancing during some meetings, and also to replace some of the older equipment that we have that is aging out. The final item was the parking lot expansion at Penn Win Elementary. We have delayed this decision until April. Bids have been received from various contractors, but we're waiting on permit approval from the township before we take any school board action. The next contract was Final Site, 3-year contract for $179,860 This company provides, the renewal contract provides services in support of the district website. Atlas Transportation, an additional $5 per run. This is just to pay for time and materials to clean buses after each run due to the COVID epidemic. CrowdStrike, $66,524.80, a renewal contract to provide personnel to investigate, contain, and remove attackers from the district's network and support their software. Lumen, $5,396, renewal contract to prevent cyber attacks on the Lmsb network. Crown Castle, $1,400, add fiber between Lower Marion District Hub at DAO to the new middle school out at 1860 Montgomery Avenue. Nutanix, total of $17,747.33 for software support renewal and HVAC equipment for the server room. Presidio, $121,380.80. Purchase new switches for the district as the current switches will be outdated soon. Second contract with Applied Video Technologies, $68,585. This is to replace some of the equipment in the existing boardroom to support the microphones and improve the structure there. Spiesel Architecture Group, not to exceed an additional $10,000. This is to provide civil and landscape services for retaining walls at 1860. Two change orders, S.J. Thomas, an increase of $2,454.75. Changes to fencing at Marion Elementary as we put in the modulars last summer. And then Watts Services, a decrease of $2,037.45. This is a credit for rock blasting that was not required. That closed out the agenda items. We then took a brief update on the middle school. We can report out the foundation is complete. The steel for Area A has been installed and Area B is in progress. We are unfortunately a few weeks behind due to COVID-related shutdown of the steel production, but the construction manager and the administration are working with the general contractor to find areas to make up the time, and we're very optimistic we can make that happen. Meeting then adjourned, and our next meeting will be April 15th at 8:30 by video conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. We'll now go to audience recognition. At this time, we're going to allot 5 minutes to audience recognition and public comment. In a moment, Ms. LaPera will open the chat feature and the timer will appear on the screen. Please begin your comment with your full name and where you reside within the district. It's important for the comment to be read that includes your name and basically neighborhood. So that we may hear from everyone, there's a limit of 1 comment or question per person, and these will be read by Mr. Roos at the end of the 5 minutes. Ms. LaPera?
It's open.
Great, thank you.
How's my volume, Denise?
Sounds good.
So far, just one.
Yes, one.
Yay. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Roos, if you wanted to please read the public comment.
Thank you. There is only one. Ruth Jenkin Winwood, are there teacher tutorials that present examples of student-driven curriculum as opposed to teacher information lectures? I also think it is important to add community to your list of family and school. That concludes public comment.
Could you read the beginning of that again?
Sure. Are there teacher tutorials that present examples of student-driven curriculum as opposed to teacher information lectures?
Well, our professional development is more than lectures around the student-driven curriculum. I don't know, Alexis, we've done a lot of work with Heidi Hayes Jacobs and Bennett Kalick. Can you give a brief response?
Sure. So when we do a lot of staff development around pedagogy, and the lecture is definitely not what we talk about with our staff when we're talking about how to deliver content. And so, it's about feedback. It's about working with students and providing individualization for those students. We've had both Heidi Hayes Jacob and Bennett Kalick and Allison Zamunda in to work with our staff several times this year around habits of mind and feedback, and making sure that we are looking at students on an individual basis and providing them feedback on the work that they're doing, so that they're driving actually even the rubrics that we're working with students on. So while we aren't producing videos, we are bringing in professionals to work with our staff to make sure that that is occurring.
Thank you. I wanted to add to the point about including the community along with parents and school staff and teachers, that I think that's a very good point. When we sent out when Mr. Copeland sent out the letter inviting people to join all of the various committees that were going on at the moment, whether it was around the K to 4 or 5 through 8, also around middle school naming. We specifically did include not just families and school community, but the broader community as well. So I did want to note that is something that we are making a point of doing. Now we can move on to our recommended actions. At this time, it is a recommendation of the board that it adopts the following PA Charter Reform Resolution, which I will read. Resolution calling for charter school funding reform by the Board of Directors of the Lower Merion School District. Whereas the average Pennsylvania school district spends millions of dollars in taxpayer money annually in mandatory payments to brick and mortar and cyber charter schools, and these payments are calculated in a manner which requires districts to send more money to charter schools than is needed to operate their programs and places a significant financial burden on districts' resources and taxpayers. And whereas The current charter school funding formula was established in 1997 under the state's charter school law and has not been changed in the 24 years since it was first created. And the formula for regular education programs is unfair because it is based on the school district's expenditures and not what it actually costs to educate a child in the charter school. And whereas the calculation for charter special education tuition is unfair because it is also based on the special education expenditures of the school district rather than the charter school. And although the General Assembly revised the special education funding formula in 2014 to more accurately target special education resources for students identified with high, medium, and low needs, this formula was applied only to school districts and not to charter schools. And whereas, because the tuition rate calculations are based on the school district's expenses, they create wide discrepancies in the amount of tuition paid by different districts for the same charter school education and result in drastic overpayments to charter schools. And these discrepancies in tuition rates for regular education students can vary by almost $13,000 per student and by $35,000 for special education students. And whereas the latest data from the PA Department of Education shows that in 2018-19, total charter school tuition payments, cyber and brick and mortar, were more than $2 billion, with $606 million of that total paid by districts for tuition to cyber charter schools. And whereas further analysis of PDE data shows that in 2014-15, school districts paid charter schools more than $100 million for special education services in excess of what charter schools reported spending on special education. And whereas the costs of charter schools for school districts continue to grow significantly each year and on a statewide basis are the most identified source of pressure on school district budgets. And whereas the need for significant charter school funding reform is urgent and school districts are struggling to keep up with growing charter costs and are forced to raise taxes and cut staffing, programs, and services for their own students in order to pay millions of dollars to charter schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Lower Merion School Board calls upon the General Assembly to meaningfully revise the existing flawed charter school funding systems for regular and special education to ensure that school districts and taxpayers are no longer overpaying these schools or reimbursing for costs the charter schools do not incur. We, along with the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, are advocating for substantial change. Are there any questions from the board? Nope. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So
moved.
Second.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And any against? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining.
All right, motion passes. We will now move forward with approving tonight's agenda via consent. Are there any questions from the board? I'd like to just take a moment and to thank both. There were a number of donations that were identified that I wanted to thank, including from the Interschool Council to plant a tree, from the Welsh Valley Middle School Home and School Association, and then also from fundraising efforts on behalf of 4 students from Valley Kinwood Middle School and Kinwood Elementary School. So I wanted to thank all of those organizations and individuals for their donations. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Mr. Roos, could you please give us a report on the Sunshine Act?
Yes, board did meet in executive session on March 8th regarding litigation matter and March 15th regarding personnel matters.
Thank you. And Ms. LaPera, can you please share upcoming meeting dates?
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. We have our upcoming committee meetings which will all start at 8:30, except where I note otherwise. The March 17th Communications Committee meeting at 7 p.m. March 24th Financial Committee Operations Budget Review. The March 25th Legislation Forum at 7 p.m. April 7th Curriculum. April 9th Policy. April 14th Ad Hoc Equity and Anti-Racism Committee meeting at 7 p.m. The April 15th Facilities and Purchasing Committee, and then the April 21st Finance Committee meeting, which is the Student Services Budget Review. The April 28th Finance Committee meeting is the Staffing and IT Budget Review. And our 2 monthly meetings of the board are at 8 p.m. on April 12th, the Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting, and the April 19th Regular Business Board Meeting.
Thank you, Ms. LaPera. As always, I encourage everyone to participate in the board committee meetings. They're a great way to get involved and to provide input. I highly also recommend people come join us at the Legislative Committee next week. It's an opportunity to speak with our local elected officials that are not school board members and talk about issues facing public education. Also, the virtual ISC art show. While we're very sad that we can't be at the Mainline Art Center for this amazing event, we can still enjoy the amazing artwork produced by so many talented student artists throughout the district. Other ISC events include a joint ISC and Lmsb health services. So please join them for a timely workshop as part of called Self-Care in the Time of COVID. It is on Tuesday, March 23rd in the evening. Also, the ISC Hot Topic on Tuesday, April 13th will be on cultural proficiency. And finally, next Tuesday, please also consider joining the Committee for Special Education for a Fitness for All Kids workshop to help families integrate more movement and exercise into your daily lives, specifically tailored to families with special needs kids. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.